if you're serious about creating and capturing value, you really have to be very thoughtful to figure out how to incorporate it into a business to generate real value. Just because you have that technology doesn't mean that you're doing great things. All of a sudden, this very disruptive technology called generative AI has shown up.
What does good customer retention look like?
Everybody in the organization wants access to those people.
It's all about you have the tools, you have your processes. It really comes down to creative thinking. So, what are your biggest ethical considerations when you are using GenAI? Welcome to Customer Insights Podcast, powered by Convert ML. Today, we go beyond the buzzwords and get practical, talking with experts who are using customer intelligence, GenAI, and great strategy to drive real retention, loyalty, and growth. And there is no better guest to start with than Joshua Kanter, a veteran CMO who's helped brands rethink what actual customer impact looks like. Welcome, Joshua. Glad to be talking to you.
Thank you. Very happy to be here.
Well, wonderful. Let's dive right into it. I want to start with what's your perspective on GenAI and how it stands to power customer attention?
Well, I'll start with generative AI in general. I think you have to be living under a rock to come out and say something like generative AI is not relevant to my business, or I can't imagine, how we could incorporate that kind of capability. At this point, I think everybody's heads are spinning, or, from the last couple of years, generative AI has made possible things that were imaginary thinking, just a handful of years ago. But despite all of its magical kind of capability, you really have to be very thoughtful to figure out how to incorporate it into a business to generate real value. I think everybody started with, sort of giving ChatGPT to people in their organization and expecting now everything is going to happen faster and better. And in some cases, that's been true. In some cases, that's not been true. I think that as companies mature in their understanding of generative AI and how to harness the power and the promise of generative AI, they're starting to realize that it's not really like pixie dust that you sprinkle on, your existing employees doing their existing jobs. I mean, you get some benefit there, but it's sort of there's a ceiling to that, and it's not very high above where you've been. Um, it- the way I think about the enterprise value creation opportunity of generative AI is the structure of your organization is a function of the processes. You have a business, you do things, right? Whether that's you produce things or you deliver services or you do marketing or whatever you do. There's a series of interconnected processes that define what your organization is. And you have organizational structures built up around that with, org charts and people, names in boxes, and then they do things and you give them tools, right? Well, the shape of the organization and the functionality of the organization that you have has grown up over decades, right? Or depending on how old your company is, but it's grown up organically over time. All of a sudden, this very disruptive technology called generative AI has shown up a couple of years ago. And now, yes, you can sprinkle it like pixie dust on top of your existing organization. Or if you're serious about creating and capturing value, you have to rethink what those processes are. The core processes that have defined the organizational structure you've built over time. Because with generative AI, you can now redefine the way that organizations function around generative AI, because some things that used to take days or weeks can now be done in a matter of minutes. And that changes things. That changes, entire processes and what's waiting for whom to do, their tasks. So, and which things require a human, which is versus to do it versus which things require a human to double check that it looks good. So the skills are different, the processes are different, the structure is going to be different. And so if you go through that process of redefining your processes around this capability, then you end up with a different org chart, different skill sets in the different boxes. And by the way, um, there are new organizational disciplines that are required. Oversight of generative AI is very different from oversight of, individual contributor, like a human.
Right.
Um, in addition, AI doesn't have the same sort of moral compass, that thoughtful humans will have. And so, ethical use of AI and governance over AI are new disciplines that organizations have to kind of create to tap into that value. So that's a long-winded answer to say that I think that generative AI has the power to transform organizations, provided that they think deeply about how to make use of the functionality. Okay, that was the first part of your question. You then went on to say, and how does this apply to retention? Which is a specific example, but my point I've just made is much broader. But now let me apply that to retention. Retention is an excellent example of a business function that is supported by a team of thoughtful humans. In this case, it's probably marketers, right? Who are paying attention to the level of engagement that customers have with the company and trying their best to maintain high levels of engagement, or when there is disengagement, to notice in a timely manner, take action, and re-engage the customers so that they never end up leaving. That's the retention function. I think that generative AI is incredibly useful for that, just like generative AI is incredibly useful for everything else. Um, I think it's, saying generative AI is relevant to retention is just as meaningful as saying that Microsoft Excel is meaningful for financial modeling. I mean, yes, it's an excellent tool, but just because you have that technology doesn't mean that you're doing great things, right? You can give someone Microsoft Excel, and that doesn't make them a world-class financial modeler, right? They
Yeah.
have to know how to use it in order to get the right outcomes. And the same is true with generative AI. You've got to learn how to make use of it and apply it to the discipline that underlines the function. And so the great retention marketing still requires strategy and an understanding of your customers and an understanding of your offering and how it delivers value to your customers. You've got to have good data. You've got to be able to notice the signals that tell you that someone is starting to kind of step out of the relationship. And you got to be committed to taking timely action to re-engage them. All of those things you need regardless of generative AI. But with generative AI, there are some things that become possible that would not be possible without it. Sorry, I apologize for the long answer, but that's what I think about generative AI, and that's what I think about generative AI for retention.
That's great, Joshua. I mean, I would love to unpack. There was a lot in that, and I'd love to unpack and get into more details on each of the topics that you touched. So maybe just to orient this conversation, and you started to talk about it briefly there, but I'm really curious. How do you think about customer retention? What does good customer retention look like?
Well, first of all, there are a few different types of retention that I think would be well served to distinguish, right? At core, retention is sort of you want to not even need to do retention, right? And the best way to obviate the need for retention is to have an amazing, core experience. Some people will talk about this as proactive retention, right? Meaning nothing is wrong. We're just going to sort of try to prevent anything from going wrong. And that's fine. It's not retention in my view. I think it's just about having an amazing experience. But there are smarter ways of doing it, and I can share an anecdote from my days in the casino entertainment industry where we did something that I would call world-class proactive retention. Then there's reactive retention, uh, which or just people think of it as just retention, but this is where there are signals of possible disengagement, right? Maybe a decline in usage or smaller transaction sizes or lower frequency or what have you. Any of those things could be giving an indication of a possible defection or attrition event in the future. and you've got to be able to notice and then take, sort of corrective action. So that's reactive retention. And then there's win back. This is where somebody actually breaks up with you, right? You have a customer and they say, I'm leaving, I'm going to go, I'm either going to stop doing this altogether or I'm going to your competitor, what have you. This is where people figuratively die as customers. Um, and of course, there are people who literally die, and you're not going to be able to win those ones back, usually.
Right.
Or ever. So anyway, those are the three kind of categories. There's proactive retention where I think the best strategy, generally speaking, is just to have an amazing value that you deliver through your core product and your core experience. Then there's reactive retention, which is I think what most people think of as retention. This is where there are early indications of a risk to the relationship. And then you got to be able to kind of notice and take timely action to intervene and get things back on track. And then there's win-back initiatives where somebody actually initiates the breakup, if you will, the attrition, and either they're successful, you fulfill their request, and then you come back to them, or at the time that they make the request, you have the opportunity to change their mind, and either could be called win back.
Makes sense. Well, needless to say, if you delight your customers, you are being proactive and you don't have to think about the other two. But, there could be different levers, competition, price, new trends in the market that could still lead to reactive, basically your lagging indicators of customer churn risk or even win back strategy. So this is great. Help me. I'm really curious. Of course, I've been in customer experience roles as well. The In my experience, staying proactive, delighting the customers, offering great experience right from the start is always step one and top priority. But losing customers and looking to win them back is always there. And I'm really curious, in your experience, are there certain strategies that have worked in your experience to win back customers?
I mean, there are, and I'm not gonna represent that there are, certain secrets that work all the time everywhere. But I mean, the thing that you can do that universally that will work is to listen to your customers and pay attention to what they value most and make sure that you're consistently delivering it. But there are a lot of nuances. For example, if you are in a subscription business,
Mhm.
in a low involvement product, like thinking about insurance, for example, right? The best outcome for everybody is you don't have to talk to them, right? There's no need, there's no claim, there's no negative event has happened. However, if it's a low involvement subscription, that's a subscription business that's low involvement. If it's a low involvement business, disengagement happens really easily. And the economics for the company depend entirely or almost entirely on renewal rates. So, how do you maintain engagement in a low involvement product without introducing structural cost or with only introducing kind of minimal or moderate structural cost? Because you could have a human call them every day and say, "We think you're great, just wanted you to know, have a happy Wednesday," right? But that would be prohibitively expensive. So you're never going to do anything like that. Um, anyway, so I think that the retention challenge, especially for like a low involvement product, is very real. And this is an area where I actually think generative AI opens some doors because you can do things in a personalized way through automation at scale that would have been difficult or expensive to do through more traditional ways. Let me give you a different example, a non-subscription business. And this I mentioned earlier. Earlier in my career, I worked in the casino industry and I ran a loyalty program. And we had people who were trying to earn their way up the tier structure. And there's a tier that everybody wanted to be in, the platinum tier. No, not the platinum tier, the diamond tier. The diamond tier was the one that everybody wanted to be in and because it opened up all of these additional benefits. But you had to get to a certain level. You had to, I mean, if you think about like an airline, you had to get a certain number of miles, right? It wasn't that, but essentially the same thing. So you had to have enough activity to get to the threshold that would then let you into the diamond tier. Um, and what we knew from experience was you have a year to earn all of these credits. Let's just say it's 100 credits, right? To kind of get to the diamond tier. If people halfway through the year or three-quarters of the way through the year saw that they were only, let's say it's three-quarters of the way through the year, but they're only halfway to the goal. At some point, the light bulb goes on in their head, either explicitly or implicitly, and they realize, you know what? I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to make it to the finish line before the end of the race. And so they disengage. They disengage, and this doesn't mean that they're never going to come back to you. It just means that they've stopped the whole structure. The reason you have that carrot dangling out there is you want people to stay engaged with you the whole time. And then, once they reach it, then they're going to want to come more to engage with all those new benefits. But when they realize they're not going to make it, part of them pulls back a little bit, and maybe part of them goes to a competitor because maybe they're going to make it at the competitor, whereas they can't make it with you. And so this is an annual sort of challenge in the industry. And what we did was we started to look at every individual customer, and you had to hit I'm just making it up, 100 credits to get there. And if you were trending at an individual level, so you, Swati, were trending to 80, right? Just based on the 8 or 9 months of the year to date. You're going to hit 80, let's say, and you're supposed to hit 100, but you realize you're not going to hit 100, and we realize you're not going to hit 100 also. We could send you a personalized offer that says, Swati, for you, if you hit 88, we're going to gift you the last 12. And then you're going to have the 100 and you're going to be in the thing. And so even though today you're only at 70, right? Today you're at 70. You know you're not going to hit 100. You're trending to 80 by the end of the year. But if you go up to 88, we're going to gift you the last 12 and then you're going to hit the tier and you're going to be great. So what it allowed us to do is person by person. This is individualized. We did the math for every individual customer and we modeled out where we thought they were going to be by the end of the year. We gave everybody their own individualized finish line so that they could stay engaged, stay challenged, and stay focused on giving us their business rather than giving the competitors the business. So this is an example of something I would call proactive retention. It's proactive because there was a predictable point at which people would start to disengage. And before it even occurred to them to disengage, we gave them this individual challenge, which looks and feels like an offer, right? Like, what a deal. But the consequence of that is that we were able to kind of get people to stay engaged and go above what we expected them to do based on all the data we had. Right now, that was in a non-contractual business where they don't have to come to us ever. They could go away immediately and we'd never see them again. But this is a strategy that worked reliably well for us, back when I was in that space.
That makes sense. I mean, what I'm hearing from you now is with GenAI leaders can really transform their workflows. And what used to be typically, let's say, a reactive workflow as a result of lagging indicators, they can actually inject GenAI capabilities to get these insights more proactively, also in a highly personalized manner. And then they can inject more personalized, customized interventions in these flows in their retention pursuit. So, I mean, it's all about, you have the tools, you have your processes. It's really comes down to creative thinking on how you bring it together.
That's absolutely right. Now, the example I just gave you was a once a year kind of thing. And back when I was working, in the casino industry, we didn't have generative AI. It
Yep.
was a massive analytical effort to get that work done, to model at the individual level where they were going to wind up by the end of the year. But now, with generative AI and some of the technologies and automation that's available today, you can build automation models that will do that kind of scoring and do the risk modeling in real time based on the flow of data that you see through your transaction systems. So one of the challenges that most organizations face, whether it's a large organization or a small organization, is that they have a bottleneck in the advanced analytics space. They have, if they're lucky, they have a small team of very smart people, maybe who have a PhD, maybe who just, know everything about R and, or Python or whatever. But they've got access to advanced analytics tool sets through one person or five people. But the problem is when you have that one person or those five people, everybody in the organization wants access to those people.
Makes
And
sense.
their list of to-dos is a mile long. I have a lot of sympathy for being that person because you want to make everybody happy, but you simply don't have enough hours in the day to satisfy all the needs. And this is where smartly, uh, intelligently crafted analytical methods, as codified through software like ConvertML, but and other things as well. But when you have software that takes the analytical workload and delivers a valuable and repeatable, consistently high value output, you can offload those steps from your bottlenecked scarce resource group of statisticians. You can take that and put that in the hands of the people who are trying to add value to the business. So you can give that to the marketers, people who are trying to do retention, and they don't have to then wait in line to get access to do this one analysis. By the way, after you get your analysis to identify who is at risk. Then you've got to put together your lists so you can then initiate a campaign, and you may be stuck in line waiting for another couple weeks to get your output. There's your ability to respond in real time to the emerging dynamics of the business is entirely compromised. And this is nobody's fault. It's a an artifact of the way that the organization has been built up. Because historically, the function had to go through this high-powered PhD group, right? The statisticians who are going to, so all roads lead there, then they do their work and they spit you back the thing. And then you have to come back for another cycle to get your next deliverable. And
Makes
so this is the way that the organization kind of built up, and it makes sense. But for certain applications, generative AI is going to allow you to shortcut all of that to get the insight in real time and take action in near real time.
Makes sense. And especially based on the example, it sounds like if in a traditional setup, something that needed three different groups. You have the research, the analysts, you have the technical people, as well as the operational people, from the marketing team to actually mobilize marketing initiatives around retention strategies. You really, through some of these new technologies, next generation technologies, you can significantly condense everyone that is needed and all that is needed to be done, both in terms of capacity as well as time, so that you can respond in a more timely manner. So of course, it's needless to say there's a lot of potential here if done right. So let's build on that, right? When you obviously there are a lot of polarities in the market right now. And I'm sure leaders in your kind of position are feeling really perplexed on what's the right direction to go. There is one side of sentiment that, it's the next shiny object to be dreaded. And then the other side where, look, this is going to solve everything. Naturally, for someone like me, who thinks, who's always looking to find the middle ground and think rationally, I don't believe it's either of the two. I'm curious, what is your perspective? Or I know that you generally believe in the power of GenAI, but what is your perspective or recommendation or framework as a leader in how you as a leader or others leaders can think about evaluating the use of GenAI in their workflows?
So generative I was very skeptical of it when it first came out. In particular, I was doing a lot of content marketing, and I was very concerned about publishing anything that had been written, even in part, by generative AI, because I thought Google is going to figure out what was written by humans versus what was written by AI. And because it's a threat to their traditional search business, I thought they will penalize companies that publish content that was written by AI rather than by humans. That was my initial perspective. I was very conservative about it. And then I tried all of these different kind of detection tools. And the more I got involved in it, my perspective started to change. I am skeptical that Google or anybody can do a reliably good job of parsing, what was written by or drafted by AI versus a human. The only way to really do that is to understand the content deeply. And this is actually where AI falls down. AI, I think of it as like an overeager fresher who's just graduated from undergraduate, right? And they're there in their very first job. They bring no job experience. They have no experience that would, no judgment based on previous work experience. And so they'll do anything you ask enthusiastically and deliver whatever you're looking for. But they have no idea if it's right. They have no idea if it answers the original question. They have no idea if it moves the conversation forward. They're just going to give you what they think you asked for. Um, that enthusiasm and that industry or productivity is valuable, but it's not self-sufficient. It's insufficient by itself to create real value. So you have to have very thoughtful oversight to that. As we're building out the tool set in ConvertML, we know deeply, we're deeply familiar with the analytical processes that are needed to take raw data and distill insights that are valuable for a business, right? And I don't say that like we solve every problem in the world. We have a narrow set of things that we know are valuable, and we understand the analytical steps in that process. We're using generative AI for some of the steps, where historically it required a very thoughtful human, somebody who had a deep appreciation for data as well as advanced analytical methods. That human was always the bottleneck in the process. And in order to replace that human with generative AI, it has the ability to do pattern recognition, but you have to tell it explicitly what to look for and how to interpret what it finds. So this has been a lot of our work at ConvertML is to translate the sort of art and science that resides in the brain of a thoughtful human into a codified set of steps that generative AI can do. It's going to have the pattern recognition, but it's also going to follow a structured process. And so that's how we're able to deliver valuable insights that are consistently good and consistently valuable. Um, because we're not just asking ChatGPT, hey, what do you think we should do? Right? I mean, if you just open it up like that to or Claude or Gemini or whatever, I'm not trying to pick on OpenAI, but any of those, you're not going to get the quality that you're looking for because you have to either structure it extremely well or make sure that you have human oversight at every step of the process. So back to your question, am I a skeptic or am I like an evangelist? I've moved from I was definitely in the skeptic camp, and it's evolved now. I don't think it's a panacea. I know that it's not, you can't just like take all your data, stick it into a black box and then hope for the best. That is not a strategy for success, right? You've got to have rigorous oversight over the operations and the quality of the output that comes from AI. But if you're willing to make that commitment and you're willing to adapt your internal processes accordingly, there's real value that you can capture.
That makes sense. So, Joshua, do you have any kind of a decision-making matrix, any kind of a two by two framework when you're evaluating whether or not to use GenAI in your workflows? Is there any particular framework you tend to lean on?
So, yes and no. I think that people should be approaching any new business process, or frankly, any existing business process, with the mindset that they can do better. And they should be thinking about, as they reconceive the work that makes up their daily, routine, they should be thinking about, how can I tap into the power of AI so that I can focus less on the mechanics and more on adding value, right? In any individual role. And so I think everybody should be thinking about that. But if I think about what's possible for businesses, this is not for individual contributors. For businesses, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit
Mhm.
um, that AI enables that would have been prohibitive previously. So if you think, I'll use a two by two matrix, just make sure I get it. So there's sort of like high impact and low impact things you can do. And let's go, this is a retention conversation, right? So let's go back to your core experience. And I mentioned, there are lots of things you can do to improve the customer experience. Let's say that you're a wealth management, like a financial advisor, okay? And you're managing people's retirement funds and investable assets for them. Um, there's a lot of work that goes into choosing where to make those investments. You have to understand the market, but you also have to understand the preferences and constraints of each of your clients. And then you put together an individualized strategy and you implement it. Well, that thoughtful work can be done with reliably good quality by a human for
Mhm.
about 50 clients. It's really hard to do that for more than that. And most financial advisors have about 400 clients. So what does that mean? That means that the top 50 get personalized white glove, thoughtful human type support, and the other 350, which is what, 87%, right, of the book of business, they're going to get sort of cookie cutter. I mean, I don't want to I'm sure that it's better than cookie cutter, but they're not going to get the same level of thoughtful support, right? This is an example of where you have the opportunity to introduce AI-enabled service where you just didn't have the capacity to do
Mhm.
it. Either you had one human who couldn't do all 400, or you're willing to hire a team, but you're not willing to hire that team for support for people whose investable assets fall below some threshold, right? It makes sense at the very top, it makes sense just below that and just below that, but at some point it stops making sense. You can't hire the humans to do that kind of work. This is where AI becomes possible, not only to generate, personalized reports and like a quarterly status update. You can do that through automation and you don't need AI. But what if the person has a question? What if they
Right.
want to ask a question and a report isn't going to necessarily answer their question, or maybe it answers it and they don't have the savvy. They're not analytically minded enough to look at the numbers in the spreadsheet of their report or the bar charts or the line charts or whatever and get the answer that they want. Or maybe they just want to hear their advisor say, here's a
Exactly.
direct answer to your question, right? And by the way, here's the supporting data on slide 3 and 7 of the report we gave you. So AI as a tool can be used for generating personalized deliverables, right? So you don't have to have a human. This is what I mentioned earlier about uh, you can have in a low involvement contractual relationship. A financial advisor is another example of that. I think I mentioned insurance earlier, but financial advisor is another example of this. You could give quarterly updates where you send over like, hey, this is how everything's going. And by the way, this is what we're paying attention to, and this is what you need to be thinking about. And this is the outlook that we predict. And we may have to have a conversation if one of these three things happens, right? You could do that through AI, but you can also have an interactive conversation, not with a human on our side. You can put together a RAG, I'm not going to get into like what a RAG is right now, but you can set up a data set
Right. Your
that
knowledge.
you train your an AI avatar on, and allow the end customer to ask any question they want of the AI avatar, who then has full command over the fact set underneath their portfolio, right? And that's going to answer 80 or 90% of the questions people have. It's available 24/7, right? And so you can materially, through AI, you can materially improve the core customer experience. And it's not a replacement for the human, but it sure moves the needle on how people feel about that relationship. And it reduces the risk of somebody deciding one morning that they're going to walk across the street to your competitor.
Right. I mean, it really is about more beyond just even scale. It's about bringing a lot of those personalized access to experts and knowledge on demand. And that's not to say remove human from the loop. Human always needs to be in the loop. It's just at what percent are they involved, right? And how much can it be self-serve? So definitely a lot of potential. And I'd love to tap into some of that in a future segment because I know you're all are working on building these kinds of avatars in ConvertML as well. But just as we come to an end, I am curious, as a leader, what are your learnings or considerations more on the ethical and the governance side of things? As a leader, of course, we all own the responsibility to make decisions that are sound, that are grounded on good judgment. So, what are your biggest ethical considerations when you are using GenAI in your processes?
That's a big question. And I think we just have to remind ourselves that for all of the appearance of magic that we all have, and if the viewers are unfamiliar with the Arthur C. Clarke quote, they should go, do a Google search for Arthur C. Clarke, technology and magic, right? Just and you'll get the quote. But so generative AI feels like magic, right, today.
Mhm.
And it's tempting to believe or trust that because it does all of these amazing things, that it will do things that we regard as relatively straightforward with the same level of impressiveness, and it won't. When it comes to ethics, it's a construct. It's a social construct that we in society that we live in today have agreed upon, and we believe it makes us better, and it makes society better. AI doesn't have that same intuition, and it won't consistently or reliably follow the conventions that we've agreed that we want to live up to. And whether that's about, integrity, or whether that's about, non-discrimination, or whether that's about disclosure of sensitive information, all of those things have to be made explicit for AI to function correctly. And it's a specialized skill set. Um, I'm a marketer. I'm a data, oriented marketer. I'm conversant about these issues, but what I'd say is that they're serious, and they need to be taken seriously. Some businesses, when they interact with customers, especially if they do it through AI, they've got to have their policies uh, governing the AI output. They need to make sure that the AI is not saying something that's irresponsible or inappropriate or factually misleading. This whole issue of hallucination. Hallucination could be a massive problem in healthcare, or financial services, or I mean there are industries where it's literally a life and death kind of thing. And so making sure that you prevent structurally AI from making stuff up is an important thing. Now, some businesses, and by the way, for some functions like marketing, having it make stuff up is part of the magic in marketing, right? It's creative. It can do brainstorming. It can come up with things that might have taken humans much, much longer to come up with as a first draft, and that's great. But in other contexts, if you're diagnosing an illness or if you're making a recommendation about people's assets, these are places where you really don't have the same tolerance for making stuff up. So I think that the governance framework needs to be much more explicit with AI. It requires, again, I think that RAGs are a useful tool that will minimize the reliance on hallucination and extemporaneous quote unquote thinking. You can direct an AI to refer to a defined set of options and choose among approved options rather than making up whatever it thinks is the right answer. So these are new disciplines that the world is still figuring out how to deliver on. But they will be increasingly important because I think that at this point, the cat's out of the bag. AI is here. It's just like this whole internet trend. I don't think it's going anywhere. I think it's going to be here for quite a long time. And if you believe that, then we have to develop mastery and mastery over the capability and a facility for governance that will protect our policies, our ethics, and the customer's well-being.
Agreed. And, when I think of also the tools that I use, right? One other layer that I like is that transparency. When AI is being used, knowing as a customer, as a user, that AI is being used. If I'm talking, when I'm talking to a customer service chat box, am I being served through an AI or a human agent? Those little levers of transparency also builds trust with the customer, with the
I think
user.
that's right. And
Some of
one thing I don't know is, are people more comfortable talking about sensitive topics with an AI than with a human? There are some things that you just aren't
yeah,
comfortable disclosing to another person, but if you know that you're disclosing it to a tool, and if you have some assurance that whatever you disclose will remain private, but will people be more comfortable doing that? I think the answer is probably yes, but maybe not universally. And so
and
these are
context
questions.
matters, right? Business
uh,
context matters. In
Absolutely,
business
absolutely. But I
context,
think,
it makes sense. But the fact that people, or not the fact necessarily, but according to the data at least, it seems that one of the top use cases around the use of GenAI is therapy, is counseling, right? So clearly,
right.
some evidence that people feel more comfortable talking to a machine than talking to humans just because of all the vulnerabilities and sensitivity around it. But yeah, more so in business context, in marketing context, in customer service context. If I'm working with the business, having that transparency on who am I talking to? How is this information being generated? I feel as a user, to me, it builds trust around the brand.
Yeah, I remember when we all got the automated voice prompts, which of course now, it's like, just give me an operator. I want to talk to a human. Give me a,
Yes.
like, but I mean, I think AI will be an extension of that. However, AI is also going to be much more flexible, right?
Yes.
With natural language processing, it's going to be able to receive, you don't have to, press four. You don't have to wait for the menu and then press
Correct.
whatever number
Correct.
corresponds to, and
Yeah.
I have to wait through all of the menu to make sure that if I thought it was two, but I wasn't sure because maybe there would be a better option that later on, like it's so annoying. But I think if it emulates a natural conversation and people are
Yeah.
able to interrupt and say, this is what I want, and it's able to understand that and then give them a direct answer to what they're asking for, that won't satisfy the Karens out there who want to talk to the manager, right? But it is going to satisfy the people who are just looking for a simple and direct answer to a question that's a legitimate question. And
Correct.
so it doesn't replace the humans, but it can take care of a lot of um, the menial elements of the core customer experience. And you're right, transparency about that is important. We will see conventions evolve about
Right.
the right way, the best way to do that.
You're right. And maybe we are the only generation who cares for these things because, we're part of this evolution. So a lot is yet to be seen.
I think that's right. 100% right. I agree. Yeah.
Well, Joshua, thank you for all your insights. I learned a lot, really enjoyed this conversation, and I'm looking forward to having you back.
Thank you. Well, thank you for the conversation. I also enjoyed it, and we'll look forward to the next opportunity.
Wonderful. Well, today we learned that GenAI is not just your attention strategy, it's your amplifier. It's best to still have human in the loop, but GenAI finally makes them executable at scale. Thank you for joining.